I'm sure you've heard fans of classic games ask, why can't this series go back to the way things were before, and these changes suck, let's go back to the old ways. But Spyro Enter the Dragonfly is evidence that using the same formula, however good it is, can actually be harmful.
If you didn't know already, I am a massive Spyro fan, but if there's a problem with any of the games, I call it out in the hopes that it'll get better in the future. The first 3 games are brilliant, and any flaws I find in one are rectified in the other 2, yet Enter the Dragonfly seems to want to build on top of that. That's fine, but only when it works. And the thing is that it doesn't. See, Enter the Dragonfly isn't so much a bad game as a good one released at the wrong time. Had this game come out now with all its current issues solved and a dev that knew what they were doing, it would have been a huge hit. But because of its failure, this style was saved for the Game Boy Advance and never seen again. The gameplay remains familiar, but because of its horrendous performance with constant, yes, constant frame rate drops, low quality textures, slow as molasses, load screens and generally bad animations, you can't begin to immerse yourself in what could be a wonderful game. The one thing that's not plagued with issues is the game's story, where although the land's dragonflies are celebrating... okay, I'm not really sure what they're celebrating. They probably won an election removing the Avalar monarchy and replacing it with a dictatorship or something. That probably explains Ripto's appearance as well.
Wait, what? You mean I went through a 3-phase boss fight in Spyro 2 just to see him rise from the lava again? I mean, okay, I expect this kind of crap from Bowser, but not from a cruel horned lizard that tries to capture castles and...
So yeah, Ripto, Crush and Gulp return to steal the dragonflies, and... really, that's it. You won't fight Crush or Gulp, so Ripto is the only boss in the game, and even then it's not made clear when you unlock his boss stage. I'm getting ahead of myself, so to sum up my thoughts on the story...
it is absolutely not interesting.
Spyro is armed with this beautifully animated flame breath and stiff controlled charge, but he's also aimed with a few new power-ups to help him in his quest to rescue the dragonflies, and if you hadn't had your frame rate drop to 10 by the time you reach the Dragon Shrine, then here's where the problems begin. You're granted the bubble breath early on, which is the only way you can capture loose dragonflies, because you know, the whole system of just walking up to collectibles was so inconvenient, and this is the only time you'll use it, because it doesn't do any damage or have any effect on the environment. And would you believe that the dragonflies are one of the most annoying collectibles of all time? Getting them from quest givers as rewards is fine, but when these things are out of the world, you've got to chase them. Yes, you heard me correctly, you've got to chase them.
You know what? I feel sorry for Ripto having to run around and try and capture these things just to power his staff. I mean, I wouldn't even wish this on my worst enemies. If these dragonflies just want to die, fine, just let them. I hate them!
It's a pain to have to move from your current breath to capture them, and it doesn't exactly make them more rewarding. If they're in hard to reach places or rewarded for completing difficult quests, that'd be worth it, but chasing them is not my idea of fun. Bubble Breath isn't Spyro's only ability, and thank Lordy Lou for that, as we're also granted the Electric and Ice Breaths later down the line. The Lightning version is less powerful than the Fire Breath, but can damage armoured and metal targets, as well as solve certain electrical puzzles. On the other hand, the Ice Breath freezes targets into a block of ice, stunning them for a short while. For the most part it doesn't damage them, but one of the clever uses of this ability is to use them as platforms for hard to reach places.
I was frozen today!
These are nice ideas and suit the game, but there's still a massive problem with them.
They're too situational, and they always will be by nature, and it doesn't really help that there's a distinct lack of puzzles for each of the elements, unlike, say, Spyro: A Hero's Tale.
Most of the time I just use the Fire Breath because there's few armoured or fiery targets, and because it's the most damaging to large enemies and it saves more time. Having to switch between the breaths makes the combat a chore, rather than the quick, easily accessible fights that the gamers are known for. That and good platforming. And there's another problem. Where are those islands off in the distance that require leaps of faith? Most of the game's locations are linear despite the large layout, and optional areas are very rarely hidden. When gliding and searching every nook and cranny, I don't feel accomplished for my efforts. It doesn't help that there's so many gems to find either. With such large levels, passing a gem accidentally can lead to an hour of searching later, and sometimes you might have to quit the level and go back in because it's more convenient than walking from the end to the beginning. Not that gems really matter unless you're a completionist, because Moneybags doesn't appear that often to charge you to progress. If I recall correctly, I've only seen him 3 times, so you'll only really need to get the dragonflies to unlock the new levels, and the elemental breaths to unlock new hubs. While not an improvement over the previous game's levels, I do like the design for the enemies and the environments. Well, maybe just the environments. Most of the enemies are either from Spyro 2 or 3, or the stock Riptox. They require a lot of time to reach the end, and a lot of devotion to clear of dragonflies, gems, and quests. But if the platforming isn't up your alley, there's other things to be done that spice things up. Vehicular combat has been praised many times as Spyro, and it returns here with different quests, although I find there's far too many of these challenges.
Spyro 2's side quests were criticised because no matter what vehicle you're in, you'd always be playing as the same character, but Spyro 3 introduced brand new characters to resolve this issue. It worked, so why isn't it applied here?
Most of these missions will have you destroying targets and vehicles like tanks, planes or UFOs, and that pretty much sums up the content. This would be fine if the land vehicles controlled better, but I was okay with the airborne ones. This doesn't mean that all the challenges are instanced off though. Every level will have things like elemental puzzles to solve in order to progress, catching thieves, slides to navigate and more. It's quite shocking to think that this is possibly the most varied Spyro game I've played out of the entire series. The best quests are the speedways, or at least they would be if the controls were better and the frame rate didn't collapse, making you miss vital targets throughout. The portals to these aren't found in the lobbies like before, but instead inside the levels themselves, providing more interesting level designs using the same themes. It's a real tragedy then that the texture quality is watery and murky, yet the particle effects have been given incredible amounts of detail. Spyro, and everyone else's skin it seems, is rubbery, and the animations seem to be springy rather than believable living motions. And I hate to say this, but even the soundtrack wasn't on par with the previous games, and Stuart Copeland, the artist behind the first 3 Spyro games, was on board for this one too. It's not terrible though, and I do recommend you check it out, but I don't feel it's nearly as good as his older tracks.
Surely there's more to this game than this. Well, I guess not, so let's wrap up this review real quick.
Enter the Dragonfly seems to be more or less what Spyro fans want. More traditional Spyro platforming, yet it feels watered down with stiff control and poor performance. The gems and Dragonflies seem like a means to an end rather than something that you'd want to collect, and the annoyance of finding both diminishes the joy one can get from obtaining them. The elemental breath gimmick is short-lived, underutilized and for the most part unnecessary. It's good that the devs noticed flaming and charging gets boring after a while, but I think A Hero's Tale did a far better job of using them more often. Even though the fun you can have with this game spikes up from time to time, the drops in frame rate, crashes and generally annoying bugs are constant, and I keep talking about them because it's important to me. I kid you not, I would have recommended this game had it not been for these issues, but if they're not persistent on other consoles, I'm willing to let it off. Even if what you've seen here has coaxed you into purchasing it, be sure to play it long after the previous games, otherwise you'll be disappointed and likely not see it to the end, and let me tell you, completing this game will take you quite a long time. In the end, this is easily my least favourite of the traditional Spyro platformers, but it's not all bad. Everyone was getting used to the new 128-bit consoles and testing the hardware, and I think Enter the Dragonfly pushed it well. If we're to see a remake of the first 3 Spyro games, I want this one to see some well-deserved attention too.
That's all for me, folks, so thanks ever so much for sticking it out until the end of the review. I'm Johnbonne, your number 2 source for number 1 games. I'll be seeing you guys later. Ta-ta for now.
What's up everybody, it's Johnbonne here. Thank you ever so much for watching this review of Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. I really appreciate it. I also really appreciate you guys subscribing, liking the videos, and putting down in the comment section below what you liked about the review, what you didn't, and, you know, discussing your experiences with this game. I'm afraid this review wasn't really the best of mine, I am aware of that. It's just that this is a game that is sort of so bland in my opinion. Like, it's just so, it's lacking life, it's lacking the passion that made Spyro 2 and 3. It lacks the story, it lacks decent combat, it lacks the energy to see all of its ideas go through. It just wants to do the same thing over and over again. I hope that carries it through, and it's a real shame, and I should have mentioned that in the script, but alas I didn't. But still, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys are informed on that game, and I hope you're going to make a wise purchase, or, you know, maybe avoid it. If you want a game that I can recommend for, in terms of the Spyro universe, I recommend the first 3 Spyro games on PlayStation, obviously. I also recommend Spyro Hero's Tale. It's more of a sort of open world like Spyro game. It sort of takes the ideals of Enter the Dragonfly, like it takes the sort of elemental breaths and the sort of challenges of Enter the Dragonfly, but puts it in this sort of open world kind of game. And it's sort of, well, I say open world, it's more free roam. It doesn't have so many instances and stuff like that. It's actually very well designed. It's a brilliant attempt. I think there was like I think it was a DS version of it called like the Eternal Knight, but it was a sort of top-down Spyro RPG. I don't really know. I don't really recommend that one, but still. Yeah, also another game I can recommend is Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. Even though it's not sort of a traditional Spyro game, it is still great, and Spyro's involvement in that is pretty good. Except, well, maybe not in the sequels, but they're still great games. Do check out Skylanders. Don't just put it down just because it's, you know, the buttering of the character. Believe me, it's a fantastic franchise. Alright, I'm going to get off now. Thank you ever so much for watching. Have a pleasant day, and I'll see you guys later. Ta for now.